Shalom, shalom, shalom. Of course, my name is LamadYahu, and first of all, I'd like to apologize. Sorry for taking so long to come back to do some YouTube videos. I just got out of doing the feast days, and I took a break, and so I apologize. I humbly apologize. But I want to get back into the routine of things again, and to understanding Yah's word and how it affects us as our daily life, and to how it works in the future. I had a couple of emails about one head covering, another one dealt with law and grace, and another one dealing with the Messiah and if he's do we believe the Messiah or do we not, and the one that came and things like that. And so what I want to start off, I guess, with is I'm actually going to start off with the commands and the laws, and do we do them today or are they done away with? So today is just going to be more of an introductory understanding, but I have a lot of scriptures for it. And then after that, each week I'm going to implement more about the law, more about what favor is or what's considered grace. And so I'm going to have that section set aside. And then I'm going to do one on head coverings. I already have it done, but I'll go ahead and do that. That's a whole different section. Then finally, about the Messiah, and why do I believe in the Messiah, why do you all believe in the Messiah, or is there a question behind it? So we're actually going to go through all those things in the scriptures. Okay, so it's nothing that I'm going to add my commentary or read someone else's commentary per se. But what I want to do is we all need to function as one unit, and prepare for the returning of the Father. And so therefore we all need to be on one accord. And so if I have anything, or if you all have anything that will help me, I'll be sure to take a look at it and read and listen to it, because that's what this is about, iron sharpening iron. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we don't get swayed by many different doctrines. You know, one of the things that we need to do as people, as individuals, is have a foundation. And once your foundation is set, then it shouldn't be easy to sway, you know. And so I pray what I do today is to start the foundation and to help and let the Messiah be the chief cornerstone of your foundation. And not only that, through the law, because remember, all things, when we get into the Messiah, at some point you're going to see that the Messiah will specifically say, these are not my words, these are my Father's words. And so we're going to get into why these are his Father's words and who does the will of my Father. You know, so all these things is actually he's pointing back to the Father. So I will get into everything about that, and then how Mashiach becomes the high priest, and according to the scripture. So there's a lot to go over, and so I know I can't do this all in one video series per se. So I just want to go ahead and just start off first with the laws, and as we graduate to go to different levels of this here, I pray that we all get the same understanding, and if not, feel free to give me an email. I have no problem with that at all, you know, because I love all my brothers and sisters. So therefore, without further ado, the first thing I'm going to get into today, which I wrote on board, is commandments, righteousness, and sin. Okay, so first we need to understand what sin is. Then we need to understand we need to know what righteousness is. We need to know what sin is, and of course, keeping the commandments. And we're going to go over those today. And then after that, we're going to go a little more in depth about the law, Torah, instructions, and some other things. Okay, and like I say, this is just a series going from beginning stage to an advanced stage, because it will get a little deeper as we keep going. And I will be instituting a little bit more Hebrew, because some of the English words don't give you good understanding of the Hebrew. And to a great degree, so also the Greek. I will give a little bit of Greek, because even the English to the Greek has a bad translation of what it's trying to say. Okay, so as time goes, you'll see these things, and I pray that we grow as one and as a family. And so without further ado, I'm going to get started with the first scripture. Now, what I want to go over first is what is righteousness. Okay, what is righteousness? Okay, so, and the best place to find out what righteousness is actually in the Torah. Okay, when it comes to New Testament, Old Testament, I will define that. I actually will show you in Scripture which is considered a New Testament, because the whole Tanakh, for example, is not an Old Testament. That's a big problem that the church uses to say this whole thing here is the Old Testament and we're under the New Testament here. And so the reason why I'm saying we're going to get into that is because I want you all to keep one thing in mind. When the time of the book of Acts, Romans, Galatians, Thessalonians, Timothy, all Revelations, all these books, okay, that were written, or these letters that were written, they weren't even in existence at the time that they were walking the earth. Okay, so when I see people in Acts where it says they search the scriptures daily, or Paul in Acts 23 verse 28 talks about he was showing them the Messiah in the law and in the prophets. So the point is, they used the Tanakh for salvation. They actually did that, and I will go in more in depth with that. But we need to, be mindful of what we're saying, Old Testament and New Testament. So that's why I really want to get into those things, so that we can actually home in on exactly what's going on during the time of the Mashiach, all the time the apostles. Okay, but I'm not going to go over that today. But as time goes, we will get into those things. Now, the first place I want to go to is going to be in Devarim chapter 6, starting at verse 24 and verse 25. Okay, so Devarim chapter 6, verse 24 and 25. And it says, "And Yahu commanded us to do all these laws, to fear Yahu your Elohim with our good always, to keep us alive as it is today." Okay. Verse 25 says, "And it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all this command before Yahu our Elohim as he has commanded us." Okay. So, of course, in here, in these two verses, they're getting rid of is letting you know that the righteousness is keeping his commands. Okay. If we obey them, that's righteousness. Now, of course, I like to give more scriptures because I don't just want to single out just one. Okay, so I'm going to go out of this and I'm going to go into the Tehillim or Psalms, into seeing what Tehillim 119 has to say. Tehillim 119. And I'm going to start at verse 172. Okay, Tehillim 119, starting at verse 172. It says, "My tongue sings of your word, for all your commands are righteousness. Your hand is a help to me, for I have chosen your orders. I have longed for your salvation, O Yahu. And your Torah is my delight. My being lives, and it praises you. And your right ruling helps me. I have strayed like a lost sheep. Seek your servant, for I have not forgotten your commands." Okay? So again, we're still talking about commands and commands being righteous. Okay? Let's go to LamadYahu or Isaiah. LamadYahu or Isaiah. And I'm going to go to chapter 42. And I'm going to read at verse 21. And it says, "It has delighted Yahuwah for the sake of his righteousness to make the Torah great and esteemed." Okay. And of course, King James, I think it says to make it honorable. So what I want you all to understand here is, when he says he delights in, it says it has delighted Yahu for the sake of his righteousness to make his Torah great. Why would he need to make his Torah great? Okay, so if we look at the history behind why he needs to make it great, what's happening is every time when Israel goes some places and they adopt to the pagan or the idols and things like that, they take on those beliefs and they cast aside the Father's Torah. Okay, and Torah means instructions, and when we get into the word law, I will go over the word law itself. Okay, but it's always like that. Just the whole pattern throughout the scriptures, that they always profane the Father's word. Always. They always put it in different ways, and they always intermix it with the way they want to worship, and that's kind of what's going on here. So if you think about the Mashiach coming, what was his design? He said, "I didn't come to do what the laws or prophets, but I come to fulfill or complete or establish." Okay, so what he's doing is the Mashiach actually was trying to, ain't no trying about it, making the Father's laws honorable or great. So what he did was he was weeding out traditions. Okay, and some people look at, I think one of the, I saw a YouTube clip. I don't give no names because I don't go bashing against other brothers and sisters and things like that. That's not me. But when I was listening to some, and they're saying that we no longer are underneath the law, and the law is a curse, and some things like that. Well, there's a problem with a whole bunch of that, and we will get into those scriptures. But specifically, if we understand law or instructions way back in Bereshit, especially Bereshit chapter 28, you'll see if you do these laws, he has a whole bunch of blessings behind doing these laws. If you do not do them, there's a whole bunch of curses behind them if you do not. Okay, so if you understand that the Messiah says he's taking the curse of the law, in other words, the law itself still stands, and the blessings of the law still stand. The curse of the law is where he's coming to take care of. And when we finally get into that part about the Mashiach and the law and him being a high priest, we'll go over those things. Okay, but we can't say that the law is done away with. Mashiach is trying to tell you the same thing. He says if you teach those laws, same book now, LamadYahu chapter 5 verse 17, 18, 19, and 20. If you read those, you're going to see he says, not one jot, one tittle shall not pass until all be complete. Now, all is not complete, and I will show you the proof of that later on. Okay, but also he says if you teach it, you'll become great in the kingdom. Future tense. So if I teach the law, I will become great in the kingdom. If I do not, I will become least in the kingdom. That's the Messiah's words. That's not Paul's writings. That's the Messiah's. Now, I have nothing against Paul's writings, but it seems like a lot of people do somewhat twist it to their own destruction. And so one of the best things to do when you deal with Paul's writings is first, because Paul says, follow me as I follow the Messiah. The Messiah says, pick up your stake, i.e. your cross, as was said in King James, and follow me. So what am I saying? What you need to do first is see what the Messiah is teaching first. Once you have a foundation what the Messiah is teaching, i.e. not his words, but the Father's words, the law, about how the law, and law makes it very negative, to people, but it's not. Law realistically means instructions. But some people say no one can do the law. It's impossible. Okay, well, I encourage you guys to look up Luke chapter 1, verse 5 and verse 6. And then say, can no one do the law? Okay, that's just one of them. But my point is that we need to understand that the law itself, it points us, number one, to the Messiah. It is a schoolmaster, and it helps me to understand how to treat my brother, my neighbors, the Father, all that's in there. So I can't call this, do away with something that's righteous, and we're going to read that in Romans chapter 7 in a minute. Okay, so what I'm saying is, and I know I'm bleeding all this back into what I'm going to separate, but they're all interlinked with each other, and so I'm going to be kind of overlapping a little bit of it. But just bear with me and be patient, and we're going to go through all of this. And prayerfully at the end of all of this, we always see just how and what's the function of what the Father wants us to do. What's our job? Okay? All right, so now I want to go to Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5. And it's going to be verse 32. 5 verse 32. All right, 32 says, I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. Now, he says he didn't call the righteous. What made them righteous will be the first question. Okay, but the sinners. Now, keep in mind, we're going to define sin. And once we define sin, then you're going to know what a sinner is. Okay, so these things are very crucial to understand because, one, we need to figure out what righteousness is, which it says his commands are righteous. Okay, and not only that, the Messiah said, if you love me, you will keep my commands. Okay, so we'll see later on, we'll start getting into a lot of the quotes that the Messiah quoted and where this came from, because a lot of his quotes that he did talk about came from actually the Torah and the Tanakh and the Psalms. Okay, so when that time comes, we'll go a little bit more in depth with that. Okay, so, but he didn't call the righteous, because the righteous are supposed to be one that stand on a righteous path, right? That's what the word righteous, or the Hebrew word tzaddik, means, to stay on the path. Okay, and unrighteous obviously means to fall off the path. And sin actually means to miss the mark, if you guys look a lot of these words up. Okay? All right, let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 1. 1 Timothy chapter 1. All right. 1 Timothy chapter 1, and I'm going to start at I'm going to read verse 9. It says, knowing this, that Torah is not laid down for a righteous being, but for the lawless and unruly, for the wicked, and for sinners, for wrongdoers and profanes, for those who kill their fathers or mothers, for murder. Okay, but why did I go to 1 Timothy? All right, so first of all, it says the law is not for the righteous. Why? Because if the righteous know what the law says, there's no need for me to utilize the law no more because I understand. Remember Galatians says it's a schoolmaster. Okay, so once I've been schooled in the law or in the Torah, and I understand what it says, and in the Torah, believe it or not, it talks a lot about love. Even if you look at the 10 Devarim or 10 Commandments or the 10 words, you'll see in there it talks about loving the Father. So it does talk about love. So I can't do away with something that talks about love to the Father and to my brothers and sisters. But my point is, whereas I didn't know, if I was in a sinful state, I didn't know what it meant. Sin just means what? Lawlessness, which we'll get into a little later. Okay, so if I don't know what sin is, then I'm out there in the dark. Okay, but if the law tells me what sin is, then I don't need to sin anymore. Therefore, by this time, I don't need the law because I'm that. Later on, you'll see also in Galatians talk about being spiritual. If you're spiritual, realistically, you're not going to use the law. Okay, why was that? Because the Spirit does exactly what the law says. They all are in agreement. The Father is in agreement with the Son, or actually the Son's in agreement with the Father, and the Ruach is in agreement with the Son and the Father. Okay, but the point is, when we have two things going on in ourselves, we got a fleshly self, and then we have a spiritual self. Okay, so the spiritual side of us is going to do what the Father tells us to do. So therefore, it's going to keep the commands. The fleshly side is what we battle with all the time. Something that will not inherit the kingdom, i.e. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 talks about those things. So this part that's fleshly is subject to the law because it tells your flesh what law is. So I can't say I 100% walk a spiritual life. Sometimes I fall short. But only way I know I fall short is the law actually told me I fell short. You kind of see how the law works. It's instructions. Now, what is the law for? The law is actually instructions that lead and guide me, right? Same thing the Ruach says. It leads and guides all truth and understanding. But the law itself is not salvation. Okay? But it is righteous. It is spiritual. And we'll get into those scriptures in just a minute. All right. Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1. And I'm only going to read one verse. In Hebrews chapter 1, verse 9. And it says, you have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. And lawlessness means what? People that don't do the law or without the law. Because of this, Elohim, your Elohim, has anointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions. Now, my point here, though, is righteousness. He hates lawlessness. He loves righteousness. So when we get a definition what righteousness is, and we get a definition what lawlessness is, then we know what the Father wants us to do. If he says, if we love him, love is just not some abstract word. You know, love requires some action, right? Especially when you read about, just like faith requires some works per se, right? So if you read that in James chapter 2, and I would encourage you to read starting at verse 14 through verse, I think it's 24 or 26. Okay, and they'll talk about you showed me your faith without your works, I'll show you my faith by my works. Okay. All right, now I want to go to what sin is, because that's kind of what's the problem here. And to get to that, I'm going to use two scriptures. There are many others, but I'm going to use two of them. One is going to be in 1 Yahukanan or 1 John chapter 3. Okay, 1 John chapter 3 and it's verse 4. Okay, so verse 4 says, everyone doing sin also does lawlessness. And sin is lawlessness. And I think King James says sin is transgression of the law. Okay, so if sin is transgressing the law, why would you say you're doing away with the law? Okay, because sin is being lawless. Okay, so if I'm not being lawless, i.e. if I'm keeping the instructions and the commands of the Father, then I'm not sinning. And I don't need the law to tell me that anymore because I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. Okay, but you can't get around that. If sin is lawlessness and saying we don't have to do the law, we're going to have a problem with that. And when we get into 2 Thessalonians, it says that the adversary, he is lawlessness. Okay, and so we'll revisit that later on. Okay, but that's the first thing. Sin is transgression of the law, or sin is lawlessness. Okay, next is going to be Romans chapter 3. Romans chapter 3 verse 20 says, therefore by works of Torah no flesh shall be declared right before him, for by Torah is the knowledge of sin. Torah is the knowledge of sin. Okay? So I can't do away with something that's telling me what sin is, because if I do away with it, I don't know what sin is. Or the ones that do know what sin is, then they know that the schoolmaster did his job. It taught you what sin is. Okay? So that's why you read, should we, by faith, shall I do away with the law according to Romans? It says, no, we established it. Okay? So we'll see all these things when we finally get into Romans. It won't be in this video, but it'll be maybe 2 videos from now. We're actually going to a lot of Romans. So I want to know one thing. I just took one little verse and said, hey, this is what it is. I'm actually going to go through all of it so we can get a better understanding exactly what Shaul's writings is saying and how he does not realistically contradict the Messiah. But if you still feel that way, my point then is lean on what the Mashiach is saying, because he's telling you to do what his father told him to do. And by definition, he's not going to say one thing and do another. And if I was to go by today's understanding, especially in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, 1 through 4, where it says that spiritual rock was Messiah, which was with them in the wilderness. Okay, so why would he say one thing in the wilderness and then come back and say something opposite today? That's not how it works, and he says he doesn't change, so we got to realistically believe that. Okay, so sin is transgression of the law. We got that, and I want to give you 2 more scriptures, and then on my next video we're going to go over commandments, all the places in the scripture talks about the commandments. We're going to go over the law, we're going to go over love, we're going to go over a lot of stuff. Okay, and I pray you guys just write all these things down. If you had any questions, just feel free to email me. Okay, I'm going to go to LamadYahu, or Isaiah chapter 51. LamadYahu chapter 51. And I'm just going to read verse 7. 51 verse 7. It says, listen to me, you who know righteousness, a people in whose heart my Torah. Do not fear the reproach of men, nor be afraid of their rivaling. Okay, so there's a lot in there. Okay, right? So it says, listen to me. He said, listen to what the Father is saying here. You who know righteousness. Now, we read what righteousness is, keeping his command. So if you know what righteousness is, he says, people in whose heart is my Torah. So he let you know that's what I'm talking about, my law. Okay, now this is what the problem we have here. Do not fear the reproach of men. So what's happening? Because you're doing the law, and they say you don't have to do it, it's done away with. He says, don't fear the reproach of the people. Don't even worry about them. You do what you know is righteous. You do what you know is right. Okay? Because if you remember in Mishlei or in Proverbs, it says if you don't do the law, what? He says your prayers are an abomination. Okay? And so therefore, it's a lot to understand, but keep in mind, remember I said earlier, is in Book of Acts, all those that were being saved as they were going over, of course the Book of Acts means the Acts of the Apostles, okay, and you see all of them being saved. But what were they using to become saved? The Tanakh, i.e. the Torah, the Psalms, and the Prophets. Okay, that's what they were using. And so the challenge would be for some people is, can you actually win souls per se by using just the Tanakh? Okay, and so that's what I'm saying. When we understand that what they consider the New Testament, when you consider those things, they're thinking that we don't need nothing that's in the Tanakh or in the Old Testament. That all we need is just the New Testament, and that's not true, because a lot of stuff that's in what they consider the New Testament comes from the Tanakh. So when I understand what's in the Tanakh, by the time I get to what they consider the New Testament, I'll know exactly what they're talking about. I'll know what it means to walk in the way. I know what it means to walk in the light, right? I would know what it means to be righteous. All these things are already defined inside the Torah and in the Tanakh. And so that's why I always encourage people to start there, okay? And then if you have a good study. For those that like King James, I'm going to give you a good study book. It's called the Keyword, Hebrew and Greek Keyword Study Bible. Okay. So what's good about this thing? Well, it has the concordance in the whole concordance now, the Hebrew and the Greek in the back of that book. But it also gives you some links in the center of it to show you where a lot of these words are coming from. Especially if you look inside just what they consider the gospel, with 4 good news, you'll see a lot of those quotes came from the Torah and the Tanakh. You'll see a whole bunch, and it actually points it out for you. So I encourage you guys, if you're looking for something to help you see what's going on, get one of those here. And then but like I said before, I don't want to get in too depth with the commandments of law just yet, because I really want us to understand first what is righteousness, what is commandments, and what is sin. Now, some homework for you guys, if you choose, is I will encourage you guys to look up righteousness. Use the concordance. If you guys got eSword, if you don't know what eSword is, it's a free download to your computer that will help you. You can type in for the word righteousness, and it'll show you all the places where righteousness is in the scriptures. Okay. Commandments, you'll see all the same thing you can do. Now, it's a tedious process because there's a lot in there, and it gives you every scripture. So, but it will help you start to realize what the Messiah is trying to say. Okay. And so, for those that are non-messianic, I don't have no words for them other than, that see that what we're saying is we're not worshiping per se the Messiah. Okay, we're actually, the Messiah said, I didn't come to be served, right? And so therefore, I'm doing what the Messiah says. He says he's trying to will us back to the Father. And that's our objective, is to go back through the Father. But yet, remember, I think I've said it before in another YouTube clip, when the Torah was instituted, or Tanakh and all their area there, they had high priests. And those high priests was the mediator between the Father and Yisrael. So the Mashiach is saying, I'm the same thing. I am the high priest, a mediator between Yisrael and the Father. So he's not doing something that's outside of Torah or something that's outside of Tanakh. Okay, and some of the stuff that we get into, like I believe, again, like I said this before in one of the videos, one of the examples that was given to me that the Messiah broke the law was the lady that committed adultery. And he told her to sin no more, and so she got up and left. So he said, well, that right there is broken law. Something should happen to her because she did something unrighteous, right? Well, that's not true. The law doesn't say that. The law says you need to bring her and him. Okay, so where was he, the guy that committed the adultery, too? Okay, so that was the law. And so we need to really define what the law is before we cast judgment on some of the things that Mashiach was saying. But again, like I said, when we get into that, we will talk about a lot of those things later. Until then, shalom.